Alright, so hello and welcome to the October NMSS Reassembly Tournament. For this tournament, it's going to be a standard format tournament, so 16,000p and 32 ship maximum. There's no other special rules, maximum of 25 tinkle generators, 6 melee blocks, nuclear option is banned, and asteroid thrusters are banned. But, let's go ahead and this is the our first bracket is going to be the neophyte bracket. All of the participants here are either submitting for the first or second time. So let's go ahead and get this moving. Up first we have Fgdfgfthgr, who I'm just going to call FGD from now on. He's one of the Chinese competitors. He's been around in the Chinese forum for a little while, and he's been on our Discord talking with us, but this is his first actual participation in an NMSS tournament. Given the fact that he's not actually new to the game, I'm actually expecting him to do pretty well. On the other side here, we have No One Conquers the Tamil Kings by Debris. Debris submitting for the first time himself, going with a crystalline submission, which I appreciate. Any one of the off-brand factions is rather nice, and you can see this thing here I think is half of his fleet budget, and the rest of his fleet budget is mostly just these distractors, but even the distractors have the large condensers, and the large condensers do quite a bit of damage. So let's see how they get going. And you can see the large ship's also carrying missiles as well, which is going to come in handy against longer ranged opponents. The crystalline notoriously do very poorly against kiters, and even their missiles, which are their only real long-range option, are too slow to run down most fast ships. But you can see that FGD brought a bunch of close-range brawlers, and they are not having a good time. The distraction ships from Debris, he went with the sponge type of distraction rather than the highly mobile, nimble kind. The nimble kind are generally very good against slow-moving opponents, whereas the spongier ones sort of work against everything in general. You can also see FGD's larger ships, which appear to be the bulk of his damage, are relying on burst lasers and antimatter cannons, which are both very solid weapons in and of their own right, but none of them really punches holes in targets very quickly. The end result being that I think we're going to see this one go down to points in each of the rounds. They did manage to kill one of the smaller distractors, but I don't think that either team is going to be able to field enough consistent damage to really get anywhere. You can see FGD's team having a hard time actually killing the distractors, while the team from Debris can more than adequately kill, but he's having a hard time actually just catching anything from FGD's team. But the point discrepancy is staying about a 2-to-1 ratio in favor of Debris, and if that keeps up, he'll certainly be taking round 1. And I'm not sure how many ways this really could go. This was kind of an ideal situation for FGD's fleet. The larger, more valuable ship from Debris kind of separated itself from the rest of the fleet almost immediately, and has been under harassment from one of the ships from FGD. The only real way it could go better for FGD's fleet is if more of the antimatter ships actually engage the larger target. But for better or worse, that isn't what we're seeing here in this first round. As you can see, the antimatter ships, now that they are both focusing fire on one of the distractors, they are making steady progress. But antimatter cannons and burst lasers, both solid weapons, but neither one notoriously high on the damage output. And Debris takes round 1. Moving in round 2. As I said, I don't know how much different this one's going to go. It was about a 1,000-point gap at the end of the last round. So 1,000 points isn't very much in a 16kp tourney, but when one team scored 4,000 and one team scored 3,000, 1,000 points feels like quite a bit. And you can see the spray pattern happening from the crystalline ship. The reason the AI does that has to do with the difference in velocity of either the host ship or the muzzle velocity of the weapon itself versus the velocity of the target it's firing at. If the target is moving, essentially against a faster moving target, it will do that spread fire, with the idea being that if it just puts bullets everywhere, then it's more likely to connect with some of them as opposed to miss with all of them. Although, as you can see, the kiters from FGD are fast enough to just outrun the projectiles entirely. But a similar point discrepancy building up here in round 2, and the damage ship from debris doing a better job of not separating from the distractors and actually seems to be picking up kills a little bit faster, but the little guys are not worth a ton of points. And yeah, Flat Paste, I'll get to your fleet in between rounds. And with less than 30 seconds on the clock, and we're still seeing about a 1,000 point discrepancy in favor of debris, which is very much similar to what we saw last round. I think we can say debris is going to be taking this match. An excellent showing, first time in the NMSS arena, and I'm not sure if it's his first time building competitively, but he does have a very strong fleet. I wouldn't be surprised if he's got experience elsewhere. And there we have it. Debris takes the match. So up next we have Aleksander with his fleet Not a Trial. Aleksander did want me to point out that he didn't have a whole lot of time to really work on the fleet, so he doesn't have a whole lot of expectations, but you can see he did go with farmers. A few of their standard cannons. I can't really tell them apart, but they're probably one of the longer range ones. This guy here you can see is just a big block of hexagons intended to absorb damage. He really only has a weapon because the rules mandate weapons are necessary. These ones have the longer range cannons, which hopefully these guys will try to keep their distance a little better, but we will see how that goes. The fleet from FGD also largely wants to fight at range, so in a competition of long range ships I feel like the Terrans probably have the advantage. We saw the kiters from FGD struggling quite a bit dealing with the crystalline ships from debris, but the crystalline ships will be considerably more durable than the farmer ships. The hexagons are one of the best damage absorption options that the farmers have, but even their best option is kind of lackluster compared to what other factions have to offer. Though you can see the AI here doing a bit of its disrespect behavior. So when a ship is selecting its opponent to engage, it makes decisions based on the value of that opponent. In this case, the kiters from FGD have assessed that the giant hexagons are only worth probably a couple hundred points tops, and since they're worth over a couple thousand, they just kind of assume that they can fly at the target and murder it, which is causing them to headbutt the hexagons, and it's working out okay against this fleet, but that sort of behavior is easily exploitable, and something you'll see a lot of the more veteran designers doing from time to time, building very cheap distractors. looks like round one's going to be going in favor of FGD. Given how the scoreboard's looking at the end of this one, I'm pretty sure we're going to see a repeat in round two. Bringing farmers is a bold move, but they do not have a reputation for success. Yeah, the big problem with farmers is that their weapon variety is rather good, but everything else about the faction is well below average. Their thruster efficiency is really bad, their armor is very low hit points and relatively high mass. All of their blocks are very large compared to everyone else, so it's difficult to make a small, fast target. Their shields are good, but shields can only do so much against significant incoming fire. Not a Trial is scoring significantly more points here in the second round. I think some of his, some of those shielded things, which, in retrospect, I don't think they're actually using the long-range cannons. I think they are using the medium range. Although it's hard to tell. But we are seeing a pretty solid lead in favor of FGD. And what do you mean a Pokemon style bracket? Yeah. That might be an interesting idea for a tournament. Each player is allowed to submit like 3 fleets and then tell them what opponent they're up against, and then they can select which fleet they want to send in. Or yeah, create like a gym leader. And I think we're about to see round 2 going in favor of FGD. A valiant effort, but unfortunately this was not Aleksander's match to win. And FGD takes the match. So up next we have Hyperion, the Tourney edit by HadronZodiac. One of the things I really like about this fleet is that every one of these ships is unique, and they're all kind of interesting looking. Some of them more so than others. I like what he did with the containers on the back here to create kind of a different sort of shape on the back. The hammerhead overall shape on that guy. And this thing, this is very unique. I've not seen a ship like that before. But unfortunately, this guy is a very big point investment, and the whole ship is held together by this plasma cannon. So that might prove to be a liability, but we'll see how it goes. HadronZodiac overall is using a lot of shields, which historically has not been a key to success, but at the same time FGD's fleet is bringing a bit less damage to the field than some of the other fleets. So the shields will probably work out better here than they might elsewhere, but this match could very much go either way. And where... yeah, this is the one. He is just getting cut to shreds. That's unfortunate. I like the way that ship looks. And FGD off to a very strong round 1. I don't know the round 2 is going to go any different either. This is a pretty convincing win. So even with the points that HadronZodiac has got, or has scored, the points in the score on the board, he's killing the distractors, and the whole point of the distractors is to distract. The bulk of the damage out of FGD's fleet are those 3 larger ships, and you can see that all 3 of those were still on the field. So as long as those survive, the lethality of FGD's fleet has not been compromised. And FGD landing a very strong initial volley and cutting down the 2 larger ships from HadronZodiac's fleet. So I'm thinking that this round is all but over. And yeah, I think Space Squid is a pretty fair description of the big one out of HadronZodiac's fleet. But FGD takes the match. Up next we have El Supremo returns by the Kingman, who previously was Mr. Kingman, so he is going with a bit of a title change. El Supremo evolving a bit this time around. You can see he's got a few of these little rocket guys. These things, they have no reverse thrust, so I can't imagine they're not going to just suicide into the enemy. But these are carrying proton swords, and we have seen what proton swords do to things. The fleet from FGD, at least the big guys, more than have the range and speed to keep their distance, but it's all going to be up to whether or not the AI decides to actually do so. And you can see that the ships from FGD are closing into entirely too short range against those proton swords and paying hell for it. Proton swords, of course, dealing the most damage of any of the Terran weapons on an individual level, and being relatively good for the cost. The fact that they're turreted is of immense value. It pretty much makes the proton swords better than any of the B lasers. Even though the B lasers are significantly cheaper, the fact that it's turreted means you don't have to worry about the ship's orientation. And in an environment like this, you can kind of influence the ship's orientation, but you'll see them flying backward or getting engaged from the side and having ships stuck up against them. And with the proton swords, that's just not an issue. And a massive point lead in favor of El Supremo. Redeeming himself after the last time, he unfortunately didn't make it out of his subpool, though his spirit did live on. Looks as though the body has been resurrected and doing a very good job. And in a colossal act of proving me wrong, a few of the rocket ships are actually still alive. It looks like they're driving toward the enemy a little bit, firing their rockets, and then changing direction, and kind of dancing around. Maybe part of the design, it will cause the ships to kind of move in and out of engagement with the enemy, which could be very useful for a distractor. So he might have observed this behavior and been just more prepared than I was. But it's looking like round 1 is going to go in favor of the Kingman. Welcome back, El Supremo, and well done in your first round at the very least. You can see some of his ships are having some mobility issues. They don't seem to want to turn and orient themselves very efficiently, and I think a lot of that is owed to the fact that all of his thrusters are kind of in a block, and when the target is directly in front of the ship, it's not really a problem. But you can see FGD's kiter on the right side of the screen having no issue just staying behind it, and the ship doesn't even want to move. And round 1 goes in favor of the Kingman, though. He was able to build up enough of a score lead to carry him through. The early disrespect last round causing tremendous problems for FGD's fleet, although it does appear that they may have learned their lesson in this here in round 2. As you can see, the kiters keeping their distance from those proton swords. Scoreboard looking much closer this time around. And you can see a large portion of Kingman's fleet is just kind of faffing about because they don't really know how to maneuver and get back into the fight. And with FGD taking a point lead, those 3 kiters could easily disappear if they get too close to those proton swords, but at the same time, as long as they continue to behave the way that they have been, it's looking like, I don't know, it could go either way. The kiters just decided to demonstrate some disrespect behavior, and as a result, one of them's already dead and one of them is very close to dying. Or no, I guess they did survive, but only just. And much better behaved kiters this time around. They did do some disrespect, but they managed to survive it. And with a small but definitely present score lead, I think it looks like round 2 is going to be going in favor of FGD. Still anyone's match though. Three-round matches are particularly good for removing your fingernails, depending on how your nerves do. And FGD takes round 2. And there we are with the disrespect again. Proton swords should never be disrespected. One of the kiters down for FGD, that could be a very big problem. With how narrow the score lead was last round, and the fact that FGD kind of needs all of his kiters alive to actually put enough points on the board, and one of them going down is a very big loss for FGD's fleet. The scoreboard's staying a good bit closer than I was really expecting it to. Under 1,000 points difference coming into the last minute. The kiters, you can see, are behaving themselves again, slowly taking apart the proton swords from Kingman. But as we've seen before, they sometimes erratically just decide to start disrespecting. And if that happens again, that could easily turn out either way. But FGD finally taking a point lead in this in this round. That probably means we're going to see FGD take the match as well. Unfortunate, but a strong showing from El Supremo. And the wonderful part about round robin is that he is not necessarily out yet. And if a mine chuck could chuck mines, a mine chuck would chuck as many mines as it could. And up next we have Proverbial Maxims by Braidedheadman. You can see he's gone with a 2-ship fleet. with quite a large pile of guns here. Looks like largely railguns, and hyper-stacked to a pretty solid extreme. Though I do like the exterior decorations on the ship. There are some plasma cannons in there too, which the plasma cannons are definitely going to inflict their fair share of harm. Let's see how this goes though. With Braidedheadman having a very offensive build, and you can see the blast pulsers trying to keep incoming missile fire under control. The sheer damage output of Braidedheadman's ships might just carry it through, but you can see they're having a hard time actually closing in on the kiters. The kiters themselves are fast, and they're not terribly fragile either. And with the distractors there as well, the fleet from FGD posing quite a few problems. Braidedheadman has a bit of a point lead so far, but because he only has 2 ships, and one of them is very low on health, the fight could turn very quickly. As you can see, one of them going down and FGD taking a small point lead. In just a moment, we're going to see the rest of FGD's fleet show up and provide various disorientation. This is not a promising round 1 for Braidedheadman. And FGD takes round 1. That match honestly could have gone either way. The kiters got very low for FGD's fleet more than a couple of times. With just a little bit of luck, Braidedheadman might very well take round 2. You can see the damage output on these 2 ships is pretty intense. It's just a matter of getting that damage on the correct target and then keeping sticky enough. The kiters, especially as they start to lose mass, you can see them getting very fast. So fast that Braidedheadman's ships are just having a difficult time actually catching them. And yeah, I agree. The win or lose, Braidedheadman ships are definitely putting on an interesting show. Though unfortunately it does look like this is going to be FGD's round as well. Another interesting thing about FGD's fleet is he's using the 3 antimatters on each of his kiters, but they're not exactly centered. He has 2 on one side, 1 on the other. It almost leads me to believe that this ship was originally supposed to be more expensive, and he ended up replacing one of the antimatters and possibly other parts to shave cost. Antimatters themselves are pretty expensive. And FGD takes the match. Good show by Braidedheadman though. But next up we have the Heavy Patrol Force by Arbitrated. A few nice designs in here. I like the color choices as well, but very heavy reliance on railguns on some of the ships, but we are seeing a ton of plasma cannons, and I think that's going to play some havoc I do like plasma cannons. They're a very reliable weapon and overall very high damage output. But you can also see that Arbitrated is making pretty significant use of shields, which, as I said before, probably would work out better against FGD's fleet than most, but I don't know that shields are going to give the longevity that Arbitrated is going to need to actually pull it off. But at the same time, the kiters will have to focus fire on some of the tougher ships. A pretty solid showing out of Arbitrated here, but I think we're seeing that FGD just has quite a bit of experience and it appears to be paying off pretty well. Round 1 going in favor of FGD. And moving along into round 2. I don't know how much different round 2 could go. There's always the possibility of some derping on the part of the kiter AI, but FGD's kiters have proven pretty resilient. Even in the face of proton swords, they've lasted rather long. But that said, I think that was one of the kiters going down for FGD, and if that's the case, that bodes very well for Arbitrated's fleet. As you can see, quite a few points getting put up on the board. I do appreciate the number of bullets coming out of Arbitrated's ships. All those plasma cannons really showing their worth. Round 2 looking very much in Arbitrated's favor. Well executed overall. And I guess we're playing another round of Monza no shit. And now with only these 2 distractors left, I can't imagine there's any universe where they're going to be able to get get enough done to actually pull this one back. Especially with Arbitrated's ships closing in slowly but surely. The little distractors from Arbitrated doing a decent job, but unfortunately they only grab the attention of FGD's distractors, which isn't a big deal. You can see FGD's distractors just flat out outrunning Arbitrated's main ships. A frustrating problem to have, no doubt. But with a 5,000 point lead, you can't feel too bad. That does mean you're taking the round at the very least. Arbitrated's fleet not going quietly into the night. And moving in round 2. As we saw, the success or failure of Arbitrated's fleet seems to hinge on whether or not those... I guess the success or failure of FGD's fleet hinges on whether or not the kiters give the opponents the proper respect, and it appears this time they did, with FGD putting up a huge point lead right off the bat. I don't think that's going to go well for Arbitrated's fleet, with most of the points already scored and no kills on the side of FGD. Looks like FGD is going to be very handily taking round 3. I'm going to speed this up. This little guy isn't going to do much of anything. And now we have Debris up against Alexander Witt. Now Debris, we saw last time, this big guy deals massive gobs of damage. Even the littler ones with their singular cannon are still going to put out plenty of pain. And the distractors for Debris definitely have the advantage over the distractors for Alexander. As you can see, that big guy just tearing through things. Plasma condensers are very serious threats and should be addressed accordingly. It just cut one of the hexagons clean in half. Debris making a very good showing. And as I mentioned before, I don't recall if he said he's had tournament experience before or if this was just his first NMSS tournament, but a very devastating first showing at the very least. And yes, gobs of damage. Look at that. Converting hexagons into multiple hexagons. Or I guess, what would they be at that point? Trapezoids? Something like that. I don't remember my shapes. It has been too long. And I think it's only going to be a matter of time before we see this round going in favor of Debris as well. Alexander's fleet did manage to get one of the distractors, but that really kind of only means the distractor did its job and kept the enemy busy. And at this point there's just not enough left on the field, I think, for Alexander to make a comeback. And Debris takes the match. So up next we have HadronZodiac up against Debris. HadronZodiac, before we saw that some of his ships were vulnerable to high amounts of Alpha Strike, which I suspect means this big guy out of Debris' fleet is still going to have a field day. But it does have to actually connect. And Hadron's fleet is very quick, although the distractors themselves killed the squid-like, or they didn't kill it, but they killed the plasma cannon on the squid-like one. Now they killed it. As I said before, I think that plasma cannon is going to be a bit of a liability considering it's integral to the structure. Without that plasma cannon, it loses both of its wings and a very large portion of its damage and mobility. So after that, it's pretty much dead, regardless of whether or not it can still fight. And yep, the squid became calamari. Which is really good if you like calamari. You can also see another thing I didn't really mention, but may or may not be readily apparent. Debris managed to build spacers onto the exterior of his crystalline ships, which is, spacers are normally included to help resist splash damage, but it does, because of how he built them and the fact that crystalline ships have to be built with the Penrose tile set, the spacers create a very neat visual effect as well. And I think we can pretty safely say that round 2 will also be going in favor of debris. HadronZodiac's fleet fighting as hard as it can, but debris seems to have just brought too much fight. And yeah, there's always penetration when the Mons Pubis is out. And round 2, that's you can see the whale kind of getting, or the squid kind of getting flanked by one of the distractors, and the missiles coming in from the top means that the DPS ship from debris is up there as well, and the missiles actually managed to snag a kill on Zodiac's missile ship, which is extra unfortunate for Zodiac's fleet. The missile ship was the last surviving ship in the last round, and with it down already, on top of basically everything else, the smaller one I don't think is worth all that much. I don't think it has enough damage output to really do anything at this point. These giant crystalline ships are just a little too much for that little guy. And yeah, I do like that a bright flash of P just means someone scored a bunch of points. Debris looking very strong though. You can see all of those plasma cannons just laying into the last ship. And now we have Mr. Kingman up against debris. Now Mr. Kingman is bringing a bunch of the proton swords, which were kind of iffy against FGD's fleet because his ships were struggling to maneuver. But these crystalline ships have generally been wanting to move into really close range anyway. But I think their size alone is going to keep them alive. They're big enough that the proton swords from the exterior cannot reach the core. Meanwhile, you can see the damaged ship from debris just tearing through these ships from Mr. Kingman. And even the distractors are able to put out enough to pick up kills on their own. I think we're going to see this match go in favor of debris as well. Plenty of murder on both sides. Yeah, you could probably make T-Yankee of some sort in this game. They already have the regenerative hull tissue like built in. All you need is amoeba flagella and the amoeba weapons. And yeah, hyperstack lasers are rather nice. They add the an extra 100 range on top of what the proton swords have to offer. The only problem with lasers is that they're very heavy. And it's looking like debris is going to take round 1 away. Like some sort of monster. Yeah, Braidedheadman. I could do without my food still trying to move. I like my food pretty still. And if someone could kindly let Alex know, I think somebody said the beta client for Twitch was not showing the video. And moving around to, I suspect we're going to see more of the same. Not that plasma cannon ship is actually laying into the proton swords. Plasma condensers are just too much. Plasma condensers are a fantastic weapon. Oh, okay. So I guess it's not the beta then. Maybe a refresh is in order? I don't really know. Somebody else was, I think... Somebody else was mentioning that they were having issues actually seeing the video, but I don't know what they did. I thought they said they turned off the beta and it worked fine. I don't know. Refresh page, turn off beta. Try the desktop app if you really need to. And with a really solid point lead in favor of Debris, as expected, I think we're going to see Debris take the match here. Yeah, 30% packet loss is insane. That is a ton. I don't recommend 30% packet loss. I don't think I could function with that level. And Debris takes the match. So up next we have Debris against Proverbial Maxims. Given the highly offensive nature of Braidedheadman's fleet, I don't think it's going to go well in this fight. Generally speaking, in Reassembly, when it comes to damage versus tank, tank almost always wins. And Debris definitely has the durability advantage. That said, Braidedheadman's fleet is maneuvering pretty well, but it's also kind of really close to the dangerous ship. Not sure. If it plays it right, it could probably actually kill the big one, but Braidedheadman ships seem to be preferring to err on the side of caution. Keeping up a lot better than I thought I would. As you can see, one of Braidedheadman's ships over there trying to take out the little distractors. These ships from Braidedheadman are very scrappy. But all it takes is one wrong move from the AI and letting that big one get a hold of it. The big one has what? 7 or 8 of the, looks like the medium-sized plasma condensers. With that kind of damage output, it's only going to take it maybe 2 or 3 seconds to cut through basically anything. Yep. Today looks like we're going to be playing several rounds of Mons Doesn't Know Shit. A colossal pile of dead distractors in the middle of the field. And Braidedheadman takes round 1. Still maintain that Big One only needs to get its hands on one of Braidedheadman's ships for a couple of seconds to just completely end it. But Braidedheadman's ships are fast enough that it's not really a problem. You can see even the corner isn't enough to end Braidedheadman's ships. They're durable enough to have escaped that. I don't know, looks like Braidedheadman's going to be taking the match. Yeah, these ships absolutely have the firepower to kill the Bruiser as well. It's just a matter of getting enough uptime. And Braidedheadman wins the match. So up next we have Debris up against Arbitrated. I'm still inclined to lean in favor of Debris' fleet. With the Arbitrated has a lot of damage output, but when it comes to sheer brawling power, I think Debris has the lead. And this is more or less the bane of crystalline. Small, fast targets that are able to maneuver, or they're able to outmaneuver the condenser shots, and also able to outrun the missiles. Just annoying. And crystalline basically do not have an answer. They need the wall or something. And debris takes round 1 in a pretty solid showing. The distractor is being very difficult for debris fleet to deal with, but it's just a crystalline problem in general. And several of arbitrated ships detonating very suddenly, giving a very large point lead to debris. With that kind of point difference, I don't imagine Arbitrated's going to be able to make a comeback. Most of his fleet assets are already down, and it does not appear to be improving over time. And there we have it. Debris takes the match. So next up we have Aleksander against HadronZodiac. HadronZodiac's fleet before was showing some problems with surviving. The missile ship doing a bit of a better job than most, largely because it's rather quick, but the squid ship in particular was having a very difficult time staying assembled. But Alexander's distractors seem to be doing their job fairly well, with Alexander's fleet having a decent lead. You can see this ship here at the top of the screen from HadronZodiac is using a lot of burst lasers. And burst lasers are kind of a weird weapon. They're way too expensive for the damage they deal, but they are very effective when it comes to dealing with small targets and with point defense. And as you can see, even against larger targets, they do an alright job en masse, but I feel like that ship could probably be less expensive and just as effective by using weapons other than burst lasers. And there you see the effectiveness of shields. Burst lasers being particularly adept at killing them. And it does look like HadronZodiac will be taking round one. And the round started off rather strong for Alexander's fleet, although with a couple of his more expensive ships up front, that is going to give HadronZodiac an initial point lead. And last round we saw the burst laser ship more or less do everything by itself. I suspect that does not bode terribly well for Alexander's fleet in this matchup. And yeah, farmers needing help is the general consensus of the community. As you can see, the burst laser ship just cleaning up. I believe Squiddy's purpose is moral support. And in that, Squiddy is phenomenally successful. Yeah, if farmers could use seeds in tournaments, that'd be a whole other matter. Their main advantage is their economy, but the AI won't use seeds in a tournament environment. So their primary advantage is completely negated. And HadronZodiac takes the match. Up next we have Alex up against the Kingman. And we saw what these proton swords would do to things in previous matches. I suspect this is going to be favorable for the Kingman. The proton swords might have a little bit of difficulty getting a hold of the cores on those hexagons, but the AI chooses its engagement range based on a couple of radiuses, or radii, and as outer layers of the hexagons get shredded, they should get close enough to actually get the proton swords on target. And in the meantime, if basically anything else gets close to those proton swords, they're just dead. Yep. You gotta use the violence attack. That's the key to success. Alright, Chief. Thanks for stopping by. Have a good one. And you can see the ship count and the scoreboard going very much in favor of Mr. Kingman. Even though ships are having a difficult time with maneuvering, you can kind of see why it is. They actually have no reverse thrust at all. So if the enemy is ever behind them, then they just don't know what to do. But round one going in favor of Kingman. I wouldn't be too surprised if round two goes about the same. The proton swords are just too much for farmers. Med beams are generally not worth it. They can only repair blocks that exist, and they're too expensive for the amount of healing that they do. You're generally better off just pretending they don't exist. Alexander's fleet holding up a lot better this time, but I think a lot of that is owed to the fact that Mr. Kingman's fleet seems to have sight faulted. Might need a bit of a reboot. And even though it's only 20 seconds left on the clock, this could still change very quickly with the nature of the proton swords. But I do think we're going to see Alexander taking round 2. Yeah, the med beams will help with block growth, but the block has to start growing, so if you could get the seed launchers to work correctly, it might be useful, but for the most part, it's most blocks don't generally take that long to grow anyway, and so the extra growth speed is usually a loss. And yeah, that's probably their biggest drawback, is that the med beams are very expensive. They're I think you only get 1/3 or so healing per second compared to damage per second out of a weapon. Points are very close here, though, coming into the last 45 seconds with Alexander just having taken the lead. And you can see the ships from Mr. Kingman have stalled out again. And that is what cost him the last match. And it looks like it's going to cost him this one. I don't think Arthur ever actually balance patched it, even when he was still working on it. He did add some extra stuff when he added the med beams and the manipulators and all that, but I don't think there was ever actually a balance patch. Up next, though, we have Alexander Witt up against Braidedheadman. I'm like 95% sure Braidedheadman's just going to run away with this one. His ships have the durability, they've got the damage, they've got the speed. But the thing about the balance for the game is that it's all algorithmically balanced. So Weapon X does 10 DPS at 100 range. It like factors all that stuff in and calculates the P cost of the weapon from there. Yeah, as I thought. Alexander's fleet just does not have an answer for these things from Braidedheadman. Too much damage output, too much speed, too much mobility. They can just kind of do whatever they want. They have a mixture of lasers, direct fire, and splash damage, so even small targets aren't a problem. Just all around really well prepared ships. Yeah, as far as generally speaking, we don't see 8,000 or like the 2-ship submissions do terribly well in these, but fucking Braidedheadman is making quite a very strong showing as he takes that match. And we've got Aleksander Witt up against Arbitrated. And I feel like Arbitrated also probably has the advantage here, if only because of sheer damage output. Arbitrated's relying on shields, but they seem to be holding up pretty well. The distractors trying to do their job. And all those plasma cannons you can see are digging through the hexagons pretty well. Well, it does appear that Aleksander Witt got the big ship, and with that a massive score boost, as well as control of the battle. Looks like Aleksander's going to be taking round 1 at the very least. These little cubes holding up surprisingly well. They tend to just explode under direct fire, but the damage output of them is not to be underestimated, it would seem. And yep, the farmers are winning this round. And moving around too. That one took a turn very quickly. And so I guess it would be very unfair to count Aleksander's fleet out just yet. Those cubes having a field day with the hexagons surviving just long enough. So it's entirely possible to do it again, although it does look like the main plasma cannon ship from Arbitrated is getting work done on enough of the cubes. If the cubes run out, then I think Arbitrated will probably fare rather well. Or if the hexagons run out. Although there you can see the cubes just took apart the main ship from Arbitrated. So I suppose it looks like Aleksander's going to be taking this round as well. Those cubes earning their keep. And actually, Arbitrated has clawed back the point difference. I guess the remainder of Arbitrated's fleet was able to clean up the rest of the main pile. The cubes are still alive over on the left side of the screen, chasing a distractor, which could end up going either way. As we've seen, those things are able to drop a pretty substantial pile of damage on their targets. But at the same time, it does seem Arbitrated's ship can at least compete in range. And now only the one cube left for Aleksander's fleet. And it looks like this one's going to be going to a round 3. And I'm going to let this run for a little bit, but I need to step away. I shall be back shortly. So enjoy the matches in the meantime, and I will return. And I'm back. It would appear that the Kingman is doing rather well against HadronZodiac here. As we can see, the squid and 2 of its escorts are already down. It's a pretty big problem for HadronZodiac's fleet. And yes, the missile ship from HadronZodiac is also bringing drones to the field. Kind of an all-in-wonder spamming thing. You know, something we can all appreciate from time to time. And yep, Harvey is awake. That was, had to go take him so he could relieve himself. And Aleksander won the last match against Arbitrated. In that case, well done, Aleksander. Yep, Doge is very P. Much urine. See, Harvey, you even have friends on the internet. Yeah, the tanks have been pretty integral to the success of your fleet, Alex. The fact that things get distracted fighting the tanks gives your cubes time to actually get all the kills. And the Kingman takes the match. So up next we have HadronZodiac up against Braidedheadman. And now we've Braidedheadman's fleet has been doing an exemplary job so far this tournament, and this match so far does not appear to be an exception. The burst laser ship, you can see, kind of cut a hole through, or a couple of the ships cut holes through most of the armor for the Proverbial Maxims, but they did manage to survive, and they did bring all of their firepower to bear. And once that happens, there's not a whole lot left for the other ship to deal with. And Braidedheadman takes the match. So next up we have HadronZodiac up against Arbitrated. HadronZodiac off to or not having a particularly great pool, and not off to a very strong start in this one with both with 2 of his ships going down very quickly, and the large plasma cannon ship still alive for Arbitrated. That is, and Arbitrated takes round 1. Yep, the Zapper ship got murdered very quickly last round, and it does not look like it's going to be long for the world in this one either. The initial burst could play havoc with those shields on the plasma cannon ship from Arbitrated, but it ended up discharging its burst on something else entirely, and as a result didn't really get anywhere on that. And yeah, looking at the list of names in the chat, pretty much everyone in chat here is a contestant, and the only one that's not has a fleet that was sent and just needs to be evaluated. So a very large portion of the contestants here are showing up for watching. There's something wrong with you people. Yeah, watching too, the safe way to play, and if you're trying to win, involves building very tanky ships, but watching two very offensively minded fleets go head to head is a very exciting matchup. But HadronZodiac takes it. So next up we have the Kingman up against Braidedheadman. So Braidedheadman here kind of has pretty much all the advantages that he could really need. All his ships need to do is keep away from those plasma or those proton swords, which, you know, of course they're not doing. But if they do just keep away, which they're more than capable of doing, they'll have no problem cleaning up these ships from the Kingman. And as for Subpool, I believe... no, I guess Subpool didn't send a fleet. So one person in chat didn't send a fleet. Fair enough. Right. The AI doesn't believe in lasers. And here we go, round one in favor of Braidedheadman. As I said, his fleet kind of has like all the advantages. It's all up to whether or not the AI derps hard enough. And as we saw, the AI can derp pretty hard and still get out of it. I don't even know if I would say reassembly is secretly AI wrangling. Like, 90% of ship design is getting the AI to do what you want it to do. And the other 10% is convincing the opponent's AI to do what it doesn't want to do. And remember, ladies and gentlemen, for an object in motion tends to stay in motion unless acted on or acted upon by an outside force. And with that in mind, Sir Isaac Newton is the deadliest motherfucker in space. Except in Reassembly, where there's apparently galactic friction of some kind. You know, don't worry about it. Don't think about it too much. Yeah, I can see that. It's the friction is caused by the dust of all the ships that have been destroyed. But there we have Braidedheadman taking that round. So now we have the Kingman up against Arbitrated. It's hard to say who has really the advantage here. The Kingman obviously has more damage on the field, but Arbitrated is able to provide that damage more consistently and at much longer ranges. If the cannon ships from Arbitrated keep their distance, then it won't be a problem, but as we've seen before, whether or not they do that is an entirely different matter. Dalek, you've put way too much thought into reassembly physics. Way too much. But it does look like Arbitrated has at least a slight advantage here in round one. They're pretty even and staying pretty even, but with that large cannon ship still alive, it's I feel like that bodes very well for Arbitrated's fleet. Although of course, you know, as I like to say, you cannot underestimate proton swords. If that plasma cannon ship strays just a little too close to the proton swords for just a few seconds, then it's just dead. And whether or not it does that is not up to anybody. Yeah, I agree. Get a little puppy commentary in here. Is that a corgi emote? That's perfect. Yeah, you. Yeah, it's you. And for anyone who's listening and hasn't really been paying attention, I very recently acquired a puppy, and he was sleeping for the first half of the pool, but now he's awake and being a little monster. So I'm playing with his toy with one hand while trying to keep tabs on the game with the other. It's going well. Yeah, the dog's name is Harvey. The fur pattern kind of divides his face in half, so he's named after Two-Face. And you can actually thank Seif, who was on here a little bit ago, for that suggestion. I had no idea what I was going to call him, and he was just like, if you don't name him Harvey, I will be very upset. I think we used other words, though. Yeah, well, him being awake at this hour isn't a problem because I work night shift anyway. I'm actually trying to get him on a night schedule so I can sleep during the day for a change, which would be nice. I forgot what that was like. And yeah, it's a boy dog. He's a good boy. but being awake and wanting to play at night isn't really a problem because that's when I'm awake anyway. It's him being awake and wanting to play during the day that I'm trying to alter. But, you know, circadian rhythms are monsters. And puppies tend to just sleep all the time anyway. But despite all the puppy talk, it does appear that Arbitrated will be taking round 2 as well. Really, it looks like that's going to put us at a 3-way tie for first. Because, well, assuming Braidedheadman wins this, who I'm feeling has the advantage here. The durability, speed, and damage output of these things has proven itself time and time again. Even getting flanked by the plasma cannon ship from Arbitrated, Braidedheadman ship managed to kill it and is currently trying to escape. Struggling, but with the heavy hitters on Arbitrated's fleet already dead and one of Braidedheadman still alive, you can see this last one's not going to have any problem. And yeah, I love 3-ways, but I don't like ties. I'm very conflicted. And yeah, Arbitrated killed one of Braidedheadman's ships, which is a lot better than I can say for most of the fleets. It's very impressive, but this round I don't think that's going to be happening. And I'm going to speed this up and cue some Benny Hill music up real quick. And Braidedheadman takes the match, which gives us a 3-way tie, and I'm going to have to figure out who's advancing to the champion pool from the neophyte pool. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoy.